This session is not simply a way for me to be highlighting some of the major highlights of the newly revised policy for high school online courses, but it's also a chance for me to hear your questions and to hear your reactions to what it is that we might be missing. And that's really important here because we need to figure out what holes we need to fill in since we are in the midst of implementing this new policy. So here's the overview of what I'm going to be covering today. First, I want to start off with some general background about why the UC faculty believed it was important to review and revise the policy for online courses that could fulfill university admission requirements. And then I want to briefly review what the A to G course lists entail, what that process is, and share with you some upcoming changes to our course submission timeline. After that is the real heart of the matter. I'll be going over the key components of the new A to G course review and approval process, letting you know who's involved, what needs to be done, what the criteria are, and then finally, because nothing is ever really simple and straightforward, especially when it comes to learning, I want to touch on some of the challenges and successes that we have seen thus far and to talk about the new directions that UC would like to head in, especially with regard to online learning. Okay, so let's start off with a bit of the policy background so that we have some context. A top priority of the University of California really is to make sure that students have broad access to a range of high quality courses that will meet UC faculty's expectations of rigor for college readiness. And these expectations, as many of you may know, are embedded in the UC A to G course requirements, which traditionally have been satisfied through classroom-based courses. But as we all know, times are changing and the landscape of learning is also changing. And online education has in fact changed tremendously since 2006, which was when the policy was initially developed. But since then, we've seen a large increase in not just the quantity of online courses, but probably more importantly, the quality of online courses, to the point where we're seeing more and more students who are completing part of their high school education through online means, whether that's partially online or fully online. And for UC to be able to keep pace with this particular shift in learning, our faculty recognized the need earlier this year to facilitate students' access to A to G online courses. And also, they wanted to encourage online course developers, programs, and schools to do their best to adhere to promising practices that will really put students in a good position for success when they engage in online learning. As a result, the faculty revisited the online policy and revised it to offer what we think is much improved guidance and a much more efficient process for any educator interested in offering online courses for their students to be able to satisfy university admission requirements. The new policy and the accompanying process for A to G approval is based on the statement of K-12 online learning that was issued by the UC Board of Admissions and Relations with Schools. I encourage you all to refer to this document. It is available off of our A to G Guide website under the online learning section, and that document essentially goes into much more detail than I would be able to go into today about what the UC faculty's principles are regarding online learning. Now here's some of the highlights of the policy revisions. One of the things I want to mention at the outset here is that an important departure from the former policy is that UC will no longer be requiring online entities to apply for what was referred to as program status in order to be UC approved before they could even submit courses to UC for A to G review. Instead, the focus now is squarely on the quality of online courses. So this means that the process we now have in place for online courses more or less parallels the process that we have in place for the traditional A to G courses that are offered in classrooms. The new policy is meant to be flexible enough to accommodate a variety of online courses, including blended courses, that are taught either locally or remotely. And the policy was also designed to address specific features that UC faculty consider are necessary to offer quality online learning experience for students. Among those features include primary instruction and academic support by teachers who are content experts, keeping a quote-unquote human touch in the whole learning process through appropriate student-teacher ratios, maintaining the integrity of student assessment, and also making sure that there is broad access to online courses regardless of a student's geographic or financial situation. The UC faculty also continue to emphasize the importance that any school offering an online course to their students provide an on-site mentor or supervisor in order to support those students. And they also recommend that the student or the school or the district consider a full infrastructure and support services that would again ensure that students can be positioned for success in their online courses. The updated policy takes advantage of this growing consensus about what the core elements are for quality online learning. So it incorporates work that has been done by the International Association for K-12 Online Learning, otherwise known as INACOL. And INACOL has developed not only quality standards for online courses, but they've done so for online programs as well as online teaching. And most importantly, the policy implementation involves a newly established partnership between the University of California and the California Learning Resource Network, otherwise known as CLRN, which I will cover in greater detail after we go over some of the basics about the A to G course list. So I'm guessing that most of you here are probably familiar with the UC's A to G course list and how to submit courses to UC. But I do want to review the basic steps here and the timeline of the course submission process because of some of the changes that will be taking place starting next year, 2013. Both the University of California and the California State University systems expect that our entering students will have completed a specific course pattern of 15 rigorous college preparatory courses that we collectively refer to as the A to G requirements. And we label each of these subject areas with the letters so we can more easily identify the different areas that are covered by these requirements. Any high school course that's going to be used to satisfy the A to G requirements must be individually reviewed and approved by UC. And the course lists serve to categorize the particular courses offered at an institution that have been UC approved to fulfill these requirements. The course lists themselves are a critical component of the whole applicant review process for a number of reasons. First of all, the course list data are uploaded into Apply UC, which is the University of California's online undergraduate application. So students are going to see that data when they're completing their applications online. Also, the UC admissions offices will use the A to G course lists to verify the subject requirements that applicants indicate that they have satisfied. Admissions evaluators also use these same A to G course lists to be able to get a sense of what the academic environment is for the applicants to UC. And this is really a crucial part of the UC comprehensive review process that we use to review applicants to the university. So these are the various reasons why A to G course lists have to be updated every year and why they need to maintain accuracy, because these lists really ought to be reflecting the actual courses that are being taught and being made available to students who are taking them in any given year. The updates to the course list are submitted to us via the UC Online Update website. The website itself is password protected, and we give users unique usernames and IDs once they have established that they meet the criteria in order to gain access to an A to G course list, and then to fill that course list with appropriate courses. So here's the A to G course list update timeline. Our annual cycle basically opens every year on February 1st. That is when new courses and the course list updates can be conducted for the upcoming school year. So for example, we've got the update cycle opening February 1st, 2013. That means during this next update cycle, courses that get submitted to us would be A to G approved for the 2013-14 school year. Starting with this 13-14 update cycle, UC will be setting limitations on the number of resubmissions that we will receive. In other words, if a course is initially submitted to us and not approved on the first pass, we're going to start setting limitations to that. So if a course comes to us in what we're calling phase 1, on or before June 1st, anytime between February 1st when the cycle opens and on or before June 1st, the course will have up to 2 opportunities to be resubmitted for A to G approval if it is not initially approved. If a course is submitted to us in phase 2, that would be June 2nd through August 1st, then there will be only 1 opportunity for resubmission. And for any courses that are submitted to UC after August 2nd, and by September 15th, which is when the update cycle closes, there will be no resubmissions allowed if the course is not initially approved. In that particular case, you would need to wait until the following update cycle before you could submit the course to UC for consideration. Okay, so now that we have the foundation down for the revised policy and also for the changes to the A to G course list update cycle, let's go over the new process and requirements for submitting and reviewing online courses for A to G review. One of the things that's important to understand here under this revised online course policy is that UC is now distinguishing between online course publishers and online schools. So in the past, these types of online entities were bundled under the same label as online providers. That's what we referred to them as. And there are slightly different requirements for an online publisher versus an online school before they can be granted access to fill an A to G course list. But fundamentally, the 2-step process for both a publisher or a school that's online is essentially the same. And, actually, let me back up for a second. I need to just go over some of these details about the definition. So UC defines the online course publisher as a program that develops its own curriculum and sells or licenses that online course for delivery by a teacher in a local school or district. An online school is defined as a credit or diploma granting institution that offers courses strictly through internet-based methods with time and or distance separating the learner and the teacher. So to establish and maintain an A to G course list, this type of institution, the online school, must be accredited or at least become a candidate for accreditation by either a regional or a national accrediting organization, and then demonstrate that it operates according to the INACOL quality standards for online programs. This showing the evidence of accreditation, that is also what we do with our traditional brick and mortar schools that would like to establish A to G course lists for us. And under the policy revision here, the aim is to, again, create parallel processes for online courses and classroom-based courses. In the case where you might have an institution that acts also as a publisher, is that perhaps your question?
It might be.
Okay.
What if there's a school who primarily teaches face-to-face classes, but there are some
So is it a brick and mortar school?
That's right.
Okay, and the online courses that are being offered, are those online courses that were developed by the brick and mortar school, by a teacher there?
Yes.
Is that course offered outside of that brick and mortar school?
Well, I'm just hypothetically.
Okay, well, in the case where we've got what I've been referring to as the homegrown teacher-created courses that are non-commercial, those need to undergo a separate, not a separate process, but they would be, in essence, the short answer is they would be considered a course publisher, which is not exactly what this definition states, but in a later slide I talk about how these definitions aren't going to be clear-cut all the way through in our implementation. But just to clarify, so an institution that acts as both an online school and an online publisher, so let's say it's a school that is online, but that particular school offers online curriculum that other schools can also adopt. In that case, the entity would be treated as an online school because under the new policy, being an online school trumps being an online publisher. Okay, I was getting ahead of myself here because I wanted to get to the flow chart. This flow chart shows in a very general sense what the new two-step process is for review. And in the next few slides, I'm going to go into more detail about the step 1 portion and the step 2 portion in light of some qualifications here. But I wanted for you to see this first so that you could understand the basics of the two-step process so that my next few slides would actually make sense to you. So beginning with the 2013-14 update cycle, the course update cycle, all online courses will undergo this new two-step course approval process. And essentially step 1 is that the course must be assessed against the INACOL standards for quality online courses. How that assessment happens will depend on the governance of the online educational program, and it will also depend on the content of the online course, which I will get into in a moment. So, in other words, the course will either become CLRN certified, because the course will be submitted to the California Learning Resource Network, or it will be self-assessed against the INACOL standards. Once that self-assessment or the CLRN certification occurs, then the online course is submitted through to step 2. And step 2 is when the course is sent over to UC for final A through G review and approval. This new two-step course review process is effective for online publishers or schools that develop their own curriculum. So any school or publisher that may purchase or license UC-approved online courses from a separate course publisher, you do not need to worry about submitting the courses. The process is set up where the original owner, the original publisher of the course, that entity is responsible for undergoing the two-step review process. So just to be clear, if I'm a representative of Happy High School, whether I'm online or not, but I'm going to adopt a course from Outstanding Online Publisher, it's on Outstanding Online Publisher to go through this review process. I would simply need to wait until they complete that process and show that an English online course appears on their A to G course list, and then I can very easily adopt that course onto my high school's A to G course list. One thing I also want to point out, if you follow this flow chart to the very end, the final box shows that the approved A to G course, online A to G course, will expire in 3 years. And we're going to be implementing this 3-year term of approval, basically so that we can ensure that the online courses maintain their quality and the various required components that stem from the INACOL quality course standards. And so every 3 years, the online courses must be resubmitted to CLRN, or they must be re-reviewed through the self-assessment process, and then resubmitted to UC for approval. Okay, this is where we're going to get into more of the details and hopefully answer some of the questions that I might anticipate from you all. So, step one of the two-step course review process, again, is the assessment of the course against the INACOL standards. And depending, as I was saying before, on the governance of the online program and the content area of the course, the institution will either follow this process of obtaining CLRN certification, or the institution will conduct a self-assessment, which I'll talk about in the next slide. That's what we're calling step 1B. But because CLRN is state funded by the California Department of Education, their scope of work necessarily is going to be limited to the review of online courses that will go to use in public high schools. So public online schools, public online course publishers that are serving public institutions, they will follow this step number 1A and submit their courses to CLRN for certification. So you might be asking, okay, what exactly is CLRN certification? Well, an online course will earn CLRN certification by, first of all, meeting at least 80% of California state content standards or Common Core state standards. By number 2, fulfilling all 15 quote-unquote power standards from the INACOL standards for quality online courses. And these power standards, I'm not going to go into detail about what they are exactly, but I will say that they are 15 standards taken from the total 52 that the UC faculty have identified as being necessary for all online courses that would be eligible for A to G review. And then they do cut across all of the 5 categories covered by the INACOL standards. And then third of all, the course must be satisfying at least 27 or 80% of the remaining INACOL standards. So in terms of those online courses that don't clearly align with a set of state standards, with either the Common Core or California content standards, an online school or course publisher can conduct a self-assessment against the INACOL standards and basically show evidence that they meet those standards. So this would be in the case, for example, of courses that fall into let's say the social sciences like psychology or sociology, or in the college prep elective areas. And that's because the main subjects that CLRN will review are history, government, economics, English, math, science, the world languages, and CLRN will also review the visual and performing arts courses. But as I will mention again later, UC currently does not allow for online visual and performing arts courses. That may or may not change in the future. But that's the policy as it stands. So the last thing I want to mention about step 1A here is that CLRN conducts their online course reviews on an ongoing basis. They don't have a set course review cycle like we do at UC. So online courses can be submitted to CLRN at any time. We would, however, encourage you to seek CLRN certification if that applies to your organization sooner rather than later, so that you can be ready to submit your online courses to UC, ideally during that phase 1 period between February 1st and June 1st. Yes, question?
On the self-assessment issue, I assume, let's say I made a robotics STEM course online where people build robots in their school, of course, and that would be under self-assessment because it's not necessarily meeting the science standards.
Right.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But it still could get AG approval. Right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Right, right. We did not want to create a situation where, because the state standards don't apply to certain types of courses, that those courses then wouldn't have a chance of gaining A to G approval. It didn't seem to make sense. I mean, the whole point in revising the policy is to try to broaden the access to A to G online courses. So we thought that that would help in that regard. So In terms of step 1B, I didn't see anyone here indicating that they were from the private K-12 sector, but this applies in the case that was just brought up about any courses that are not aligned with state standards. So for step number 1B, this is when the self-assessment against the INACOL standards would be done. And this step is effective for any online course publishers that serve only private institutions or any private online schools. As I just said, any online courses that don't match up with established state content standards. And then also, importantly, this is something I want to highlight, starting with the 2014-15 school year, non-online high schools, districts, and programs that offer their own online courses would also have to conduct the self-assessment before submitting courses to UC. The self-assessment will hopefully be facilitated by a form that we are in the process of creating. It will be set up so that the self-assessor can easily know what each of the 52 standards are and can receive some guidance about how to demonstrate evidence of meeting those standards. So, on to step 2. Step 2 of the course review process is when the course is submitted to UC for review and for possible A to G approval, ultimately. Step 2 can only occur after a course that qualifies for CLRN certification earns that certification. It can also occur only after the appropriate self-assessment is done for any other kinds of online courses that cannot go through the formal CLRN review. And those kinds of CLRN certified or self-assessed courses can be submitted to UC again during the course list update cycle for February 1st through September 15th. And the A to G course approval for any course that comes to us, actually, online or non-online, is generally based on 2 components. And these are the same criteria that we use for all new courses that are seeking A to G approval. One of the things that we keep in mind is that the A to G course evaluation guidelines must be met. And these guidelines are available on our A to G Guide website so that you know exactly what type of information, what type of detail our analysts are looking for when they review the courses that are in their queues. And second of all, we're looking for the course's respective subject area course requirements, that they fulfill those requirements as established by the UC faculty. Those subject area requirements are also listed on our A to G Guide website. And what I also want to mention about the review process is that the courses will come to our subject area analysts who then do blind reviews of all the new courses. We do this and don't allow the analyst to see the name of the institution when they're reviewing it so that they can be as objective as possible when they're reviewing the content of the course. New courses that get submitted to us for review, especially if they're submitted earlier in the review cycle, typically will get a response of A to G approval or not within 4 to 6 weeks of the submission. Our aim with the online courses, particularly the CLRN certified online courses, is that those courses would be UC approved if they meet our criteria within 2 to 4 weeks of the submission. And that has to do in large part with the fact that the step 1A includes CLRN's review of not just the quality of the online delivery, but also the content of the course. So if CLRN's already conducting some of that review process, our analysts aren't going to have to worry so much about whether the content is there or not. It helps our review process. It doesn't replace it, but it certainly facilitates the speediness that we can offer. In terms of schools or programs that want to adopt approved A to G online courses, this flow chart basically shows what those steps are. So if you're a brick and mortar school or if you're an online school and you want to add an approved online course to your list, you simply need to, and this is assuming you already have an existing A to G course list, or that you're a new school and you go ahead and set up your access to be able to fill your A to G course list. You go on to the UC A to G online update website, you indicate your intent to add a previously approved online course. Then you just need to review and then click a button to certify that your program or school or district will satisfy UC's online learning guidelines, and you are able to then select an online course that you want to add to your A to G course list. You could select that from the list of all the approved online publishers or online schools that are already in our database, and then you add the online course to your list. So we want to make that process as easy as possible for those on the receiving end of the online curriculum that will be offered to students. Okay, so with our policy implementation so far, as I alluded to at the outset here, we've already seen a fair amount of challenges and successes that I want to just briefly touch on here. So in terms of challenges, it's actually been quite a challenge for us, because I guess in some ways it's a culture shift here of getting people to move away from what they had understood before as the former policy and process of UC approving online providers. Because we're getting questions from people like, well, what are you going to do to approve the online publisher? Or what are you going to do to approve the online school? And I just want to reiterate, we're not approving an online entity, because we value the fact that this whole process really is about the quality of the courses, online or not. So we want to focus on the courses themselves. And I would certainly appreciate all of you, as you go off sharing your newfound knowledge about the UC online A to G process, to remind your colleagues that this is not about providers or publishers or schools and whether they are UC approved or not. This is about online courses. So the next challenge that we've had to face here is, of course, identifying expert reviewers of quality online delivery. Part of the beauty and the relief that we have here with our new partnership with the California Learning Resource Network is that, they are expert reviewers of quality online delivery. And that's why we have established this partnership. The fact, though, that CLRN, as it stands, does not have the capacity to review the non-commercial online courses. In other words, those courses that are homegrown, teacher-created, that won't necessarily be sold or licensed outside of a school or a district, means that we have to trust the self-assessment process and really push for adherence to the INACOL quality standards for courses, for the online courses. And this again deals with the third point here, which is that we expect there to be a huge volume of these homegrown teacher-created online courses, some of which may already exist in our A to G course list database, but have not exactly been flagged as online courses, because schools sometimes will create a classroom-based version of a course and then take the exact curriculum and content and everything and move it to an online platform. Well, it's still online nonetheless, and that's why we are setting this self-assessment process so that we can still ensure that any online course that comes to us for the A to G content review, at the minimum, will meet the INACOL quality standards, especially those power standards. And then the fourth challenge, as I was explaining when you asked your question, is that our best attempt to define very clearly what an online publisher is versus what an online school is we're expecting it to have fuzziness all around, because there are all kinds of variations, and we're getting those questions too. So we ask for your patience as we sort through it. I mean, we feel like we have a very solid foundation that's laid out. And so we just need to be able to build upon that foundation and clarify what different circumstances might require for the review of online courses as we launch into next year when online course review, that whole process changes. On that note, I would also encourage you then to be a frequent visitor to our A to G Guide website and the FAQs section, because as we get greater clarity, we will be posting questions and appropriate answers onto our website. Yes, question?
Okay. On the homegrown classes, currently we submit them, really don't even distinguish them online versus, and we basically have until, but in 2014, if I've identified, hey, I'm teaching online, I should self-assess and resubmit. And that self-assessment will be good for 3 years, assuming I haven't made major changes to the course.
Correct.
Okay. There's a second part of that. What do we mean by an online class? I NICOL definitions, if I remember right, are like 0 to 30 is just normal course of online content. Between 30 to 80 is blended. And after 80, I'm picking these numbers up to memory here.
Yeah.
That's an online course.
Right.
What's your definition of an online? Is anything, any flipped courses, anything blended online?
Well, that is part of the reason that we are granting the homegrown courses more time, because, I mean, those who've created those types of courses, to be fair to them, need more time to figure out, you know, what they might need to be changing about the way that the course is delivered if they're going to meet the criteria that we have for either online publisher or online school. And quite frankly, UC also needs to be very clear about when the homegrown course would require the self-assessment, because it actually is online. So I don't have a clear answer for you right now, except to say that we are already working on that, and we hope to have some, you know, greater clarity in the months to come.
I don't have any.
Piggybacking on the same question, then would we need to change the course title and the transcript abbreviation for that course, since it's now resubmitted as a different course?
Yes, if it is in the end treated as a different course, then yes, we would want the schools to, you know, tease that apart. But hey, let's end here on a good note with successes. So
I hope there are other issues with just what you just said there. For example, I could take Algebra 1 online and then retake it again in the classroom, and course codes would allow me to take that course and get 2 A's in the same class. I'm just trying to know that's how SISs work.
yeah,
And so there actually are issues there.
yes, and we will take the year that we have ahead of us to work that all out. I think one of the biggest successes that's coming out of this whole situation with the revised policy, though, is that now we have appropriate experts who are reviewing online courses. You know, we have our partnership with CLRN to ensure the quality of online delivery, and then we as UC are all about A to G, so we will be ensuring the quality of the A to G content based on our A to G criteria. And I think importantly for those of you who are online educators, that we've now moved in this direction where we've got a greatly improved process, and we hope that the improved efficiencies will allow for more and more online courses to be able to gain the A to G course status and not have courses prevented from gaining A to G because of the backlog of applications for program status, for example. Along those lines, we are also anticipating next year and in the few years to follow a pretty large increase, very likely increase in the number of A to G course offerings that are going to be on the A to G course list. And this is a very good thing because it does what the faculty would like, which is broader access to A to G courses, online or not. We want more students to have more access to A to G courses, because this means that we will see greater numbers of students who would then be prepared for UC admissions. And then lastly, I mean, because all of what we do in the world of education is really about the students, a major success coming out of this is the enhanced quality of online learning for students. As I close here, I just want to mention, in terms of the new directions that UC is moving in, this is a key point, because I think for many online courses, this principal certification option was what schools were really kind of hanging their hats on here. But because the new process takes into account a way for the online course delivery to be assessed either by CLRN or to be self-assessed, we have the process in place. So principal certification, the process whereby a principal could just, you know, review the content of an online course, certify it, and then allow that online course to appear on the student's home transcript, that option will no longer be allowed starting with the 2013-14 cycle, because we have the new process in place. We have something that we think is a better substitute than principal certification. Yes, question?
I have a question that came up in my district. Does summer school 2013, does that count as this year, or does it count as in other words, would this take place in September, or would it take place in June?
Well, okay, that's a good question. For courses that are taken in the summer months, it really depends on the status of the student, because if it's a summer course where the student is not entering into senior year, then the course typically is viewed as a course applied to the upcoming school year. So that would mean that principal certification would not apply in those cases. If the student is taking the course as a rising senior, then the summer course would most likely be applied to the previous junior year, 11th grade year. And so principal certification would be fine. As I did,
I don't know if that makes much sense. A sophomore to a junior, that course counts to junior year. And a junior to a senior counts to junior year. They're all count to junior year.
so, well, let me, I will double check that with my articulation team lead on that.
It makes sense what you're trying to say, if every year applied to the following year, but after the end of your normal senior year, you're taking a summer course to finish up your degree, that would count towards your senior year. That might make some sense.
That is true. I'll double check that and see. But at least that was my understanding of how that works. That is getting a little more into the details of what my staff handle. So let me check on that. That's fair enough. So with regard to the evaluation of our current policy about lab science courses and the visual and performing arts courses, I did want to reiterate that the online science courses under the current policy are okay for A to G approval. They do, however, need to involve a supervised on-site wet lab component. And as it stands under the current policy, the online visual and performing arts courses are not allowable. But the faculty are going to be re-evaluating this component in this next year. And given the changing landscape of learning, this policy may well change too. With all the changes that are happening in this next year, though, really what's fueling all of this is fundamentally UC's desire to be able to encourage educators to add to their way of teaching very cutting-edge, innovative, promising practices that will allow students to be successful in their learning. And for those of you who've not yet seen it, this I wanted to show is our newly launched, newly redesigned A to G guide. And as is highlighted here on this slide, we do have a brand new section on online learning that covers much of the information that I've covered today, and then some. It actually goes into much greater detail about the specific steps that one would have to go through if you're a new publisher trying to set up an A to G course list versus an online publisher that may already have an existing list. What does that mean for you? I didn't want to go into all of that detail today because that content seemed more appropriate for a training workshop, which this was not. But I also want to point you to some helpful resources, some links to the California Learning Resource Network, to iNACOL, and also to the websites where you can access the public A to G course lists and the all-important online update website where you can submit your courses to UC. Thank you.